All right, hey everybody, what's going on? Chris Stewart here.
Julie Gonkel.
We are your co-hosts for this new project that we're doing. It's called the Redemption Project, and it is a 12-week intensive coaching series with Julie and myself, looking at a couple things. One, codependency, looking also at anxiety, depression, and addiction, and how to come up with solutions for that. In the last decade or so of doing different personal development work, 12-step work, recovery work, and things around this nature, we have defined 4 things that we think keep everybody from reaching their full potential. The first one is trauma. This does come from a childhood experience, and we will kind of get more into that as we go along. I will explain some things to you guys about that. We believe trauma is the core of codependency. Codependency is the core of addiction, and addiction is the core of what we call all evil. And all evil is just defined as the things like fear, resentment, and lack of spirituality that keep you from getting the things that you want in life. So we have a program, it's called the Redemption Project, like I said, and we're just going to kind of go through an introduction to that today. One of the things that we always think is very imperative in doing this work is to look at why are we codependent, right? And we want to look at what are the reasons for being codependent. So we have a questionnaire that we're going to come up with, and we're just going to read it to you right now based on the 10 things that might define whether or not you are actually codependent. So 10 questions that we want to ask, right, is 1, do you consistently love, care, give, or take more responsibility than the other person? Do you have difficulty being totally honest, direct, and loving in your communication? Do you spend more time second-guessing people's motives, needs, or actions? Do you worry or become obsessed or tormented about a specific person and your relationship? Do you often feel the need to give up or give in just to keep the peace between the two of you? Are you the one who always has to go the extra mile in order to make the relationship work? Do you often have to use persuasion, bargaining, favors, or threats in order to get the person to do what is best for them? If you're a parent, you know what we're talking about. That's not codependency, that's parenting. We just want to make sure we get that clear. Number 8, do you cover, lie, alibi, excuse, or justify another's behavior to yourself or someone else? 9, when things go wrong in someone's life, do you feel responsible to make them right again? And number 10, do you tiptoe around people for fear of what they may say, do, or feel? So when we're looking at these things, right, we want to check out and see how did codependency start, right? And codependency comes from what we've defined as a childhood trauma where one of your needs wasn't met. This doesn't mean we're blaming the parents at all, okay? What it means is that everybody is human, and sometimes we don't know as children to ask for the things that we need, and also sometimes, it could be the parenting challenges, right? There are a lot of people that were raised with single parents, and in order for that parent to provide for you, they have to work 10, 12 hours a day. So they're not going to be able to be there to meet every single emotional need that you have in order to meet your physical needs as well. So we want to make sure that we're very clear on that, right? This, like you said, this is a 12-week course, so we're just going to kind of spend about 15 or 20 minutes going over it with you so you kind of get a backdrop to what it is. I'm going to go over a few things, and then I'm going to pass it over to Julie, and she's going to talk about kind of what this work meant to her. Now, for me, I'm going to take steps 1 through 3. So in the first week, we're going to kind of establish what is codependency, how are you codependent, and we define codependency as 2 things. 1, it's either the need to be validated by somebody in order to feel okay about yourself, or 2, it is the need to feel okay about everybody around you in order for you to feel okay. Now, typically on the first one, you'll notice this about, in relationships, you'll look at those relationships. It always kind of starts, we look at the trauma, right? And let's go back real quick, Jules, to, let's say you're in 3rd grade and you walk into a classroom and somebody's like, oh, your hair looks stupid. And you're like, what? Oh no, how did that happen, right? Like, my hair was cool yesterday.
Right.
Now all of a sudden I'm like the loser or whatever. And so I look at the person who's making fun of me and I decide, you know what? I guess I got to look like them because I don't want to get made fun of anymore. So right there, I attach what? Shame. Even though it's just a hairstyle, I don't think of it as just hair. I think of it as my whole entire being is now made fun of, and people think I'm different or I'm uncool, and I don't want that to happen. that leads to this codependency of where now I want to make people think I'm cool, so I'm going to do whatever they do in order to be liked. Does that make sense? Everybody follow me so far?
Yes.
It's what we call people pleasing, right? And the thing is that started in 3rd grade, and we continue to carry it all the way through. And that's what's so great about this work is we're going to go in and we're going to find each and every single one of those little situations that happen, and we're going to eradicate. We're going to go in, we're going to re-examine, and then we're going to remove all the things that are around that, right? And then we're going to replace it with some new thought processes and more positive self-beliefs and also some spirituality. The 3 things, there are 3 intentions that we guarantee you will get from this program is that you will get a new identity. A lot of times people, they have what we call a title, right? Like, oh, what do you do? And you tell them what you do for a job, and that defines who you are, right? That has nothing to do with who you are. That's just what you do for work. But this is where people get confused. We're going to eradicate that and give you a new identity. I am a humble, inspirational, and powerful leader. That sounds great compared to, oh, I am a motivational public speaker, which is what I do, right? Which is still cool, but do you see the difference? I can take humble, inspirational, and powerful leader into everything that I do. As a partner in a relationship, as a neighbor, as a son, as a brother, and also in my job, and as a youth director, as a youth leader, as a world leader, as a youth whatever that looks like, that's what we can do, right? Same thing. Julie is what's known as like a horse whisperer, right? Like she presents these amazing equine experiences for people, right? But we don't go, oh, you know Julie, the equine chick? No, we don't say that. Like, you know Julie, the super nice, compassionate, kind, generous, loving individual, oh, that does equine therapy? Oh, of course, I know who you're talking about now, right? See, so we want that for you. We want you to have that same type of identity, not just that title. The second thing that we're going to do is we're going to improve that self-esteem and also give you a vision. What did you lose along the way that codependency has taken from you, or anxiety, or depression, or addiction, right? When we were all 5 or 6, we all wanted to be something, not typically somebody with mental health issues or addiction issues or codependency, right? We want to be something cool. We're going to go back to that, get it all situated, and then push that forward. It's going to be amazing. Third thing is that we really want to increase your spiritual relationship with yourself and with higher power, with God, whatever you choose to call that in the spiritual realm. We want you to be rock solid in that moving forward, because that's going to be key in order for you to move forward and eradicate those old negative core beliefs and really embrace the new positive ones that we're going to do in this course. So that's what we kind of start with the first week. The second week, we run into what we call imprints. And we look at how codependency developed, and we go back through and we look at certain events. And let's say, well, I'll just give a quick example. I moved out of the house at 15 years old. And in that moment, I thought that I wasn't seen, I wasn't heard, I wasn't appreciated, and I wasn't loved. That's what I told myself my entire life. When I went back through this work, I looked at how did other people respond. I'm like, well, my parents said, well, this is on you. You know, we're not kicking you out, but if you want to leave because you don't want to follow the rules, that's great. Okay, well, I didn't think about that. How did other relatives respond? They were like, Chris, come back home. It's not safe out there. And I'm like, you don't care about me, doesn't matter, right? And then we're going to look at how did I respond. I was like, well, nobody loves me, so I'm not coming back. And then we go back through and we address a few more questions that we'll have, and how do I look at it now, right? What actually happened and these kind of things. And then what do I want to take moving forward? In the third week, I know we're kind of going through this a little bit quickly, but we just want this to be an introduction so you get an idea of the program. We don't want to spend 2 hours going over the whole thing with you. So in the third week, we get to my favorite, right? The 6 A's, which we call affection, affiliation, acceptance, attention, ability, and approval. And these are all the 6 things that we feel every child should have received in order to be healthy. These are kind of like our 6 emotional needs. Now for this, we spent a lot of work on, because it goes along with my 3-tiered age process into this unfulfilled life. From 0 to 8 is when we all adapt our emotional responses. Everybody, doesn't matter if you're from Uganda, Beverly Hills, Chicago, whatever. And that's anger, sadness, fear, right? You guys all know the emotional spectrum, right? Then you go from there to 14 to 17. And this is when we kind of start to get that first identity. When we get to this place called high school, right? And we start looking around like, hey, who's like me here? Is there anybody like me here? Because I feel like an outcast, right? Like, hey, that guy's got a skateboard. You want to be friends? Okay, cool. Or, hey, that guy's got a football and I play football. Maybe we can be friends, right? And so, And also in this process is when we start to do that people pleasing, and then we also start to kind of give into peer pressure. So if you are, if you've had some addiction issues, this is where everybody, and I don't care, I work with youth groups, faith-based youth groups, I work with tons of high schools around the country, and 99% of all kids experiment with drugs or alcohol between the ages of 14 and 17. For some reason, it's become a rite of passage in America. You go to Europe, it doesn't happen like that, right? It's a whole different thing. But in America, that's what we do. It's usually at a party, or it's at a wedding, or it's with an uncle, or it's with a neighbor, or it's with a friend, and we all just try a little something. And with people with that untreated trauma from that 0 to 8 years old, they take a drink or they take a drug, and you get this warm blanket feeling. Those of you that have suffered from addiction know what I'm talking about. And you feel like, hey, I'm funny. Hey, I'm really cute. Hey, I'm whatever it is that I've always wanted to be, but I didn't know how to obtain. And the problem with that, though, is it releases so much dopamine in our brains that the brain says, hey, whatever that was, let's keep doing it, right? We like that. And the brain doesn't know you're doing drugs. It could be chocolate cake. It could be a lot of different stuff, right? So we go back through, and then final stages from 19 to 21 is where we really look, because then you typically are on your own, and there's no accountability from any parents or anything else, and you start to do these type of behaviors over and over, and then you start to get some consequences, right? So this is where you get into those toxic relationships. This is where you really start to get into drug and alcohol, or the anxiety increases because you can't handle things at school, or you get into a job that you weren't equipped for, or you get depressed because you don't have a life plan, you don't know what to do, and then it just kind of continues to spiral for 1, 2, 3, 8, 10, 12, 20 years till you get to the point of where you need to come to do this workshop, right? So that's really kind of like what we're going over. The other thing that we're going to talk about at the end is the Enneagram. And the Enneagram is something that we love to do because it's like a spiritual personality test. And so if you've maybe done the Myers-Briggs, you get the whole introverted, extroverted, I'm this, I'm that. That's all cool. But the difference is the Enneagram actually goes in and pinpoints weaknesses. It pinpoints what you really want to hear in life and what you haven't heard, which is key. So we're going to talk about that, but I'm going to save that for the end because I kind of want to continue on with what we're talking about here. In week 4, we're going to look at what we call family closeness. So that's where we designed an Enneagram, which basically starts with like your great-great-grandparents up here. It's kind of like the mob boss thing, like boss of all bosses, and then you kind of trickle it down to where you're at. And then you're going to draw lines and see how close am I to people in my family, and also how close were my parents to their parents, right? And that's kind of what we call toxic family shame. So we're going to see that there's a pattern in, even before you were even thought of in your family that has now come down to you, and that's not your fault. And so we're going to look to eradicate that. In section 5, week 5, I should say, we get into personal boundaries and intimacy. For a lot of people, boundaries have been crossed almost since day one. And it's not that it's right or wrong, but one of the first boundaries that gets crossed that people don't realize is if you lived in a house where people were allowed to come into your room and go through your stuff. Now, we're not saying that parents shouldn't have the right to go through their children's things if they think something is wrong, but in this way that we get used to, it could be brothers and sisters coming in stealing our candy out of the drawer. That happened to me. I was like livid, right? Or they came in and they, whatever it is, people go through your sock drawer. They go through whatever it is and they take your journal, or a lot of diaries, right? For you young ladies that had diaries, right? People come in and steal it and then talk about it somewhere that was inappropriate, right? So it's like once you have all your boundaries crossed, then you get into high school, maybe some of your physical boundaries were crossed, right? People come in and start touching you. It wasn't a cool situation. And emotional and spiritual as well. So we're going to look at that. Then we get into 6, and this is one of Julie's favorite topics. I mean, it's one of mine too, but this is Julie's specialty right here, and this is called the Wounded Heart's Cry for Love. So I'm going to turn that over to her, and she's going to kind of give you guys a little back into kind of really one of the most impactful weeks that we will definitely be doing. Jules?
So A Wounded Heart's Cry for Love, when I was going through the work, it was so profound for me to go through this chapter and really look at not only my perception of myself, but my perception of my relationships with other people and kind of how that was being derived. And what I was really able to find was my wounds that I didn't know that I had, these internal wounds that were like hidden, right? And I knew that I didn't feel good, and I could see external results from that, but I still couldn't heal it. And I even doing tons of work, going to therapists, all these different things, and I get to this profound moment, I'm like, oh my gosh, these wounds have caused me to have, from these one-way relationships, have caused this codependency. Whoa, like it was earth-shattering for me And then I went even deeper, and I was able to see that I looked at my relationships with men, and so much was based on my past wound of needing that approval from my dad. And it's not that my dad was a bad guy or anything. He just was incapable of being able to provide that for me from his own past stuff. And that was a huge thing that I was able to find out in chapter 5. And so as I went through that, I was like, wow, I really was able to see how I conducted myself in those relationships. And I found that this was my wounded heart's cry for love, and that there was these toxic relationships, and that it really wasn't that I was broken or that something was wrong with me. It was that I had unresolved wounds, of which I didn't know that scar tissuing was still there. And I was having these triggers and these effects. And, I would have like these patterns of just, the extreme highs and like the excitement and everything. And then I have those extreme lows of just like the depression. And, in my truth, I actually really had more of the lows than the highs. And I was just like, why am I seeing this? Why am I feeling this way? And it was revealing that evidence to me. And it was from that pain of abandonment from my dad. Going even deeper, and I sought out these male roles to kind of replace that in my life and kind of fill where that wound had been. And it had never fully healed. It was scarred. And it wasn't until I did this, I was able to see those patterns, and I was able to finally see, like, it wasn't just standing at that bridge and there was no crossing. I was able to fill those holes in those gaps and walk across the bridge and actually have that healing. And I was able to finally move forward and not live in the past, but to actually sit back and go, oh, in new patterns or present day stuff, and go, oh, I know what this is. I've healed this wound. I don't need to engage in that. And here's my boundary. And being healthy for myself and being able to connect on a much deeper level with other people, not only male relationships, but friendships, community relationships. And I was able to actually be myself authentically. Hey. And I just want to say, like, if any of this resonates with any of you, just know that you're not alone, and that, there is a solution, and just keep coming back. I felt like, the internal battle was never won until I completed this work.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great, because most of these things we don't know. We don't know that's what's causing it. Right. We just know the feeling of uncomfortability, right? We know the feeling of, I love what you say, the high highs and the low lows. Like, I don't know about before I did this work, I'll tell you, in 3 days, we were getting married, and it was like on. That was it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, it doesn't even matter. You're my soulmate. It was like, what's that movie, Step Brothers? Like, we're going to be best friends, right? We're going to make snow angels, and we're going to, like, just not go to work, and we're going to go to the Bahamas and go to the water, And then, like, 2 weeks later, I'm like, I really don't think this is working out. I know I said we're going to get married, and I know we're going to the Bahamas, but I canceled the trip, and you got to go, right? And it was just, and the thing was, I didn't see that as the pattern of this codependency, where once I got the approval, then I didn't want it anymore. Right? Which is, it's like a sick way of thinking, but it's how we operate when you don't go in and heal these wounds. So that brings us to week 7, right? Which is where this is where we really kind of get the second half, we go strong, right? Because week 7, we go into grief and loss. Just talking about what we were just talking about, this is one of the things where, like, we never grieve, most of us never grieve anything we've lost in life. Like, at 8th grade, we got broken up with, and if you guys all remember, that was like the worst week of your life. Remember, you laid in bed, you thought, oh, I'll never have another girlfriend, even though you probably, like, held hands and walked around the park, like, twice or something. You thought this was life. And then you got another one, and like 2 weeks later, then you meet somebody else. And then they break it. And then, and you just carry through your whole life. And then you wonder why you're in these loveless marriages or these loveless relationships at 35 or 45 years old. It's because you've never healed the wound from when you were 12 or 13 or whatever, right? When you didn't understand it. So we dive into that. This also includes job loss. Right. A lot of us don't, we lose a job and we're like, that was ridiculous. It wasn't even my fault. Right. Anybody ever said that one before? And maybe it wasn't, but I'm just saying, we look at that and we don't ever heal that, right? So we got to go back through and heal all those things, past relationships with family, all those things. And then we get to week 8. Now I love week 8 myself because then we start talking about secrets and shame.
Yes.
And I want to share a quick little story about secrets and shame. So as you guys know, I just told you, I left home at 15 years old. Me and my father, we had not gotten along for almost my entire life. I'd probably say around the ages of 7 to 8, up until almost 45 years old. Me and my father we didn't see eye to eye. We didn't really care for each other. It was nothing going on. I called him one day to forgive him. At this point in my life, 45, 46 years old, I said, you know what? I just got to forgive this guy because it's killing me. And I called him up to forgive him. And when I said I forgive him, I said, if I can ever help you out, let me know. And he said, son, how did you know? I'm sitting here drinking wine out of a coffee cup. It's 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning. I haven't been to church in years. I got fired from being a missionary. Your mom divorced me because I hadn't talked to him in, like I said, 8 or 9 years, so I didn't even know all this stuff had happened. And I said, yeah, I'll help you. So we got him some help, and then I took him through this work. And as difficult as that was, I knew that it needed to happen because there were some things he needed to do. Now, here's the key part. I had been waiting for 40 years to get the apology from him, if you'll remember, right? So I had called him and apologized to him. He never responded with that, okay? Let's just make sure everybody's clear on this. I said, I'm sorry. He was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm like, is there something you want to say? You know? And he didn't. But when we got to do this work, when we got to step 8 or week 8 on the secrets and shame, this had been about almost 16 months into the new relationship where I'd been working with him on a lot of stuff. And he called me one day and he says, wow, you must really hate me. And I said, why would you say that? You know, like I've been helping you out for over the last year and a half, and now you're sober again, and you got your life back, and you got remarried, and you went back to church, and all these things happened. And he said, well, I just realized in doing this work, I was like the worst father ever. And it was because my dad had held on to this shame that when he was 19, I had an older brother that was born stillborn. And he had died about 3 hours after his birth. And on that same night, my dad had gone home back to his parents' house after visiting hours were over, and he left my mom, and he went back. And when he walked in the front door, he had found that my grandfather had shot himself and killed himself. And so on that one day, my dad had lost his son and his father with no explanation. And he internalized that and thought that he had done something wrong and that God hated him and that this is what was caused. And he was finally able to get free from that after 69 years. Well, not because I guess it happened when he was 18, so whatever that is, like after 45 years or whatever it is of holding on to that he was able to release that, and that actually changed his entire life, even at 7 years old at the time when we did this. So that's why I love this work, and we get through that, right? After that, we get into anger. Anger, we know, is a secondary emotion, but it controls most of us. Am I right?
Yes.
On a lot of things. Traffic, let's not get into it, but but so if we know anger is a secondary emotion, we have to look and see what's underneath that. Yes. Is it sadness? Is it fear? What are these things? And we dive deep into anger and find out your anger isn't really even about anger. It's just misrepresented emotional distress. And that's what causes so much of this. You know, you can be angry and depressed. A lot of people think depressed just means that you're sleepy and tired. Right. That's not true. A lot of people that are super angry or like they present at a high affect are actually severely depressed. And then a lot of times in anxiety can do the opposite. A lot of times people think anxious people are like all crazy. Right. Sometimes anxious people are like, what up? I have so much anxiety I can't even talk. Right? It's a fact. Right. So we get into that, and 10, we crown it off with fear. The coup d'etat, the thing that keeps us from doing all the stuff that we want to do, Jules, am I right?
Yes.
And we dive deep into that, and you got the soul surgeons here to go in and pull it out with you, and we make things so much easier to be able to handle in life, right? And it's the work that speaks for itself, right? We're just the vessels that are honored enough that God has put us in your presence to even bring this work to you. But this is the key to all this stuff. In week 11, we kind of go back through and we look at the overall codependency profile. So we'll give you a profile to see like what triggers you really need to watch for more than others, whether or not it's boundaries or intimacy, or whether or not it's anger, or whether or not it's grief and loss or shame, or whatever that looks like. And then in week 12, we come up with your future. So we give you an easy to digest, easy to facilitate plan of action that will work with you. And there'll be some follow-up calls. Now we're actually offering 2 bonuses as well with this work. The first one is going to be the Enneagram. Right. Enneagram is something that I've studied in detail, and I'll tell you, when we started doing some Enneagram work, right, because I think, Jules, this is the first time you'd ever done any Enneagram work, or had you done something before?
No,
Okay.
I had done different personality tests, but I had never done the Enneagram, and it was so interesting what it revealed to me and things that I knew about myself, but the Enneagram really helped me explore more of, oh my gosh, that's why I do that, or oh my gosh, that's why I think that way, and explain things. But also it allowed me to really see what I was compatible with you have a professional team,
right.
Am I going to work well with that person? What kind of obstacles might we come up against? And being able to see how you operate in relationships, not only on the plus side, but also on that negative side, to be able to go within yourself and being able to kind of develop more skills.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I'm going to go over just a couple quick things with the Enneagram, because like I said, I don't want to go over all of it because it won't really understand it until you know. But Julie is a type 1 and a type 7. So we'll do her and then we'll do me. So type 1 is what's known as a moral perfectionist. And her fear is being bad or wrong or evil. Her desire is to have integrity, be morally correct, and be right. Her weakness is resentment and repressed anger, and she longs to hear that you are good. That's the 1. The 7, which is kind of like you have like what they call a wing or a support with that, is type 7, which is the entertaining optimist, right? So for her fear is missing out, and she does not like to be trapped in emotional pain. Her desire is to be happy all the time and fulfilled. Her weaknesses are gluttony and the need for constant stimulation, and she longs to hear that she will be taken care of. And so when we started doing this work, I was able to point that out to her, and since then, we've really been able to see a change, really, in the way that she addresses her relationships and the things she does, because for a long time, she would make things either right or wrong. That was it, right?
Yes.
Hey, this happened. I must have done something wrong. I'm like, no, it's traffic. It's not your fault. Like, it wasn't because you were 5 minutes late getting out of the house that God decided just to create a bunch of traffic just so you can't get to where you're going on time. Like, or whatever. That's a funny example, but it was very much like that. And with that 7 wing coming in, that fear of missing out or always having to be stimuli, we're able to do some more meditation practices and realize that just taking a day off doesn't mean the world's going to end, and it doesn't mean that you're going to lose out on stuff. It just means that you're going to be able to refill your cup and move forward. Now, for me, I am what's known as a type 3, which is the successful achiever, and my underlying cause is a supportive advisor. So the successful achiever, my fear is failure and being worthless, which you guys already hear that tie into what I talked about at 15 years old when I left home, and that's what I felt. I can't make this up. My desire is to be successful, valuable, and admired. My weaknesses, image conscious or deceiving myself. I am so positive, it's sickening. And I say that, which is good to be positive, but like I will be positive when I need to be realistic. Like I always give the example, like if my house burned down, I'd be outside like, sweet, we're getting a hotel room tonight, But like I gotta be like, dude, your house is burned down. Like you should probably like think about that, And what I long to hear is that I'm loved for who I am. Once again, going back to that 15-year-old Chris, right? And seeing that was one of my core things. And this was before I even knew about the Enneagram. Now the type 2, my fear, the supportive advisor, this is going to happen with a lot of you empaths. This is going to happen with a lot of people that suffer from addiction and things like that, and also obviously codependence. But the supportive advisor, my fear is being unloved, worthless, or unwanted. My desire is to be loved and appreciated. My weakness is pride or not getting my own needs and emotional well-being met. And I long to hear that I am loved, right? So with supportive advisors, this is what we see. We see people helping other people to the point of where it breaks them. They're always doing things for other people. They're letting their boundaries be crossed. Like you have to get up at 6 a.m. and all of a sudden your friend calls you at 10 p.m. saying, hey, can you come pick me up? I'm at a friend's house and I don't want to take the bus. And you're like, oh yeah, where's that? Oh, 45 minutes away? Okay, great. And then you go and you spend 3 hours giving this person a ride when it was kind of due to their irresponsibility of not thinking about it earlier.
Right.
And then you get home at 1:30 in the morning and you get 4 hours of sleep, and then you show up late to work, and then what happens? Then you get, right? So we look at that. It all interacts together. So anyway, that's the 12-week course in a nutshell. Those are the 2 bonuses that you're getting. The second one that we were promised about is love languages, right? So love languages are so important because when we look at different love languages, we look at quality time, words of affirmation, gifts, acts of service.
Yes.
Why am I blanking on the fifth one? Wait, what is that? Yeah.
Words of affirmation.
Is that okay? Okay. Anyway, I think I may have got all five. But either way, when we look at the love languages, the 5 love languages, we want to figure out what is your love language, because a lot of people, quality time. That's
Quality
right,
time.
that's yours.
Gosh, yes.
That's because I was going to talk about that first. So that's one of the things, because a lot of people in relationships, whether or not it's business or whether or not it's romantic or anything, they don't even know the other person's love language.
Friends.
Right? Friends. And so when we do that, then we all of a sudden, like our examples, right? Like Jules is quality time 100%, right? So what does that mean? That means that when I show love to Julie, that means that we talk on the phone for like 2.5 hours. It's awesome, right? Because we get to talk all the time, but it's quality time because that means that like we have undistracted time, and it's not that we're talking about anything serious necessarily. Mm-hmm. It starts off probably something serious, talking about work, and then all of a sudden we just keep talking and talking, and there's that. And then for me, my love language is actually gifts, but it's not. A lot of people confuse gifts with like expensive things, like oh yeah, I need a new car. Like that's not a gift, that's a new car, right?
It's more like a baked good for him.
It is, right? Like if you bake me a cookie, I'm like a dog, loyal dog for like ever. Like I will lay at your door for like 20 years and never move, right? Because to me, like I love to bake, and so I know what goes into that process, and so I know if somebody takes that much time for me, how much it means to me. And in the same way, I love to give that gift. Right? So it comes back and forth. And the same thing that Julie loves to do, and where you would really see her shine, and you will when you take this course, is that she is awesome in the one-on-one. Like that's the other thing, how this kind of dynamic works. Like I'm great with the crowds, and then she's really good with the one-on-one, right? So it's not that neither one of us can do both, because we do both, but just where we kind of shine in that aspect is like, I'm like hey, give me 1,000 people, and she's like, hey, can I just have one-on-one time with you? I'm like, okay, great, you take that, and I'll take this one, here we go, right? So anyway, that is what we really feel. These are the 12 weeks of codependency work, and then the 2 bonuses that we really feel will set you up for success in everything. Each and every single one of you has greatness in you. Yes. We understand what it's like to go through so many different tragedies in life and turn it around and make it triumphs. And like Julie said earlier, like you are not alone in this. This is, so many people go through this. We just ask that, you would look at that and see if this is something that I totally identify with, then please let us know. We would love to take you through this work. And it doesn't matter what kind of setting it's in, right? Typically we would do this on a Zoom setting, just because we work with people all over the world. But, if you live close to us and you would rather do it in person, we can do that as well. If you want us to come speak and do this work at, a treatment center or at a church or anything, we can fly out to wherever you're from and present it to a group of people as well. So anyway, we're just open for all that. We hope you guys got something out of this little presentation. Like I said, it's right about 30 minutes, so we tried to kind of condense it, but obviously there's so much more behind it. But anyway, this is just a little tidbit of what we're up to for the Redemption Project. It's our newer thing, and we're excited to bring it to you. Julie, you have any closing comments?
No, I would just say, if you're seeking answers, and I think all of us, are seeking answers, especially
Absolutely.
in like the
what's
current.
My purpose? What's my life about?
What's my purpose? What's my life about? But even in the current times that we've all kind of endured a little bit more, and it's looking at what else is out there that I haven't maybe tried, and that was something that Chris and I really looked at when going through this material, and what identified for us so much in that paramount change in our own lives and in our own walk and discovery and who we really are, but also in our community. Yeah. In multiple communities for both of us.
Absolutely.
But how are people hurting? How are the children that are our next generations in shaping this world being affected, and we don't even know?
Yeah.
As far as our interactions with them. So that was a lot of what we looked at, and just bringing love and light and more awareness to people. And if you're one of those people or you're interested, please don't hesitate to get a hold of us.
Absolutely. Okay, that's it. That's all we got for you guys. You guys, please enjoy everything. Know that we love you. Even if we've never met you, it means whether or not we care, whether or not you live or die, because everybody in our world has worth, everybody has value, everybody has purpose, and everybody is loved. Take care.